Hi everybody, TJ Mac Vintage Cards here, and today I'm doing a profile of Thurman Munson, looking at his regular Topps issues from 1970 to 1979, not looking at like special issues like Kellogg's or Hostess or whatever other sets he might have been in, or Leaders cards or anything like that. These are just his regular 10 Topps cards from 70 to 79. And Thurman's one of the players I have a lot of admiration for. As you can see by these are older PSA labels. I bought these many years ago because I was a fan of his, and when I got back into collecting, he's somebody that I wanted to acquire his cards and add them to my collection. So with that, I'm going to talk a little bit about Thurman Munson and his place in history and where I think he rates as far as Hall of Fame consideration goes. I do research these. I don't read off notes, so just kind of go along with me as I go through this. And I'm going to compare him to another Hall of Famer, and it's Harold Baines. And this is not to knock Harold Baines. He's been elected to the Hall of Fame. I've said this before. When you're elected to the Hall of Fame, you're in the Hall of Fame, and that's what you are. And I don't want to disparage that because he had a 22-year career, a nice career, and it really doesn't matter. I'm not a voter, and I think that to see him in there is a good thing for him. He was a good player, and certainly the committee felt that he deserved it, so I don't want to take that away from him. But when you compare careers, if I wanted to pick a career, and this is what I'm posing to you today, if you could have a 22-year Major League career like Harold Baines or an 11-year Major League career like Thurman Munson, and let's talk a little bit about these careers, and you tell me which career you would rather have. That kind of tells me where you're at with your Hall of Fame thinking. Now, you may not think Harold Baines deserves it or Thurman Munson, but I think a lot of voters put a lot of emphasis in longevity. A lot of videos I see talking about the Hall of Fame talk a lot about longevity. I more prefer the football model when they do the voting. They don't look at longevity as much. It matters, but it doesn't matter as much as the impact that player had during that time. So like when they look at quarterbacks, there's other quarterbacks that can have higher statistics than another, but if they were in World Series or Super Bowls for quarterbacks and they performed well in those Super Bowls, that's going to get more consideration than a person that just played a long time, made some playoff games, but never really made a big impact. So they'd have to put up really good numbers to get that consideration. So I kind of like that model for some baseball players. I think Sandy Koufax was certainly considered that way by the Hall of Fame because he was utterly dominant, but I don't think that should be the bar. For example, Roy Campanella's in the Hall of Fame. He had 3 MVPs. Now, his career started a little later because of, racism and not allowing black players into the majors, but he still started in his mid-20s. He had a relatively short career that ended tragically. He won 1 World Series, but his WAR, his wins above replacements, actually lower than Thurman Munson's, and their careers were pretty close in length. So that's one of the things that I'm looking at. Thurman Munson's wins above replacement is, again, 46, which is the highest of any player that's not in the Hall of Fame and higher than some other Hall of Famers, again, like Campanella and Ernie Lombardi, and I'm sure there's some others in addition to that. So that's one thing to consider when you're looking at that. I don't put everything to wins above replacement, but it's one of those things that I look at. But if you had a career, and let's say it started here, you come in 1970 for a first full season. You played a shortened season in 1969, but in 1970 you won the Rookie of the Year. You go to 3 All-Star games, or 7 All-Star games in your 10 seasons. You won 3 Gold Gloves in those 10 full seasons, 11-year career though, and you won 3 Gold Gloves playing one of the most difficult positions in baseball, the catcher position, which is really like the quarterback on the field, if anybody's ever played catcher at any level, or I'd say high school or above level, or watch baseball or coach baseball, you know the importance of a catcher on a team. You were a .292 career hitter. You won an MVP in 1976. You went to 3 World Series in a row. You lost the first one, but you won the next 2. You hit .373 in those World Series games and had a .909 OPS, which was just a little bit lower than Kirby Puckett's, who was considered an outstanding World Series performer, who played only 12 seasons, and he's in the Hall of Fame as a first ballot Hall of Famer. And his career ended tragically, not quite as tragically as Thurman Munson's did, though, who lost his life, but still tragic nonetheless. And you, in those 12 seasons, those 11 seasons, you had the captain's C put on you, so to speak, by George Steinbrenner, selected as the Yankees captain. He was the first captain since Lou Gehrig. So that tells you what Steinbrenner thought of Thurman Munson as a player in his clubhouse. And teammates really love this guy. There's a book by Ron Blomberg that just came out called The Captain and Me. And Blomberg was a player on the Yankees during part of the 70s, and him and Munson became very good friends. And he just talked about the leadership that he had. He was really a blue-collar type, Thurman Munson. You know, a guy that backed his teammates. He did have some run-ins with Reggie Jackson, but he also knew the importance that Jackson had on the team. And Jackson was that really final piece that put the Yankees over the hump in '77. And Munson respected that, even though they definitely had two different styles and approaches to the game. And, you know, Munson worked with that, and he really was one of those guys that helped keep that clubhouse under control, which could be quite a wild clubhouse in the 1970s on the Yankees. So you consider all those things he did. Now let's talk about Harold Baines a little bit, who played 22 seasons. He had some postseason games. They played more postseason games in part of his career, like division rounds and things like that in the 90s. But he did go to a World Series in 1990. He had, I believe, 7 or 8 at-bats with the Oakland A's, and they got swept by the Reds, and he hit less than 200 in that World Series. Now, his postseason career, he did hit, I believe, over 300. He was a .289 career hitter. He did not hit any of the milestones, though, like 500 home runs or 3,000 hits. He had 384 home runs and had over 2,800 hits. He had just over 1,600 RBIs. Never won any major awards in his career other than Silver Slugger awards, which I don't really consider major awards, but you might, so I'll just put that out there. He went to 6 All-Star games in 22 seasons, one less than Thurman Munson went to in just his 11 seasons. He was never really considered one of the great players at his position like Munson was. Munson arguably would have been the first or second best catcher during his days in the American League, with Bench, of course, being the best in baseball. But I would say Carlton Fisk and him would certainly be competing with one another, depending on the year, for the best catcher in the American League during that time. And Harold Baines also DH'd after he was 27 years old for the rest of his career. So in 1986 was his last really full season playing in right field, and the rest of his career he DH'd. So he's really only playing half-time if he's just hitting. He's not playing the field in his other games. So if you had to pick a career, which one would you rather have? Now that, again, tells me a little bit about where you're at with your mind in voting. So, you know, if you rather be Baines, you're kind of more into the longevity and the adding to the numbers and just having that long, very good career. Now, there's some guys that dominate or exceptional players and have long careers. That's not really the discussion. It's just those kind of guys that you have to really dig a little deeper for if you think they're Hall of Famers, not the Willie Mazes and Mickey Mantles and guys like that. But these other guys that really do, I think, have a place in Cooperstown. And I think Baines, you know, again, not taking that away from him, but I think Munson should have a plaque in there as well and be considered just because of what he did during his time in baseball in his 11 seasons, which is enough to get Hall of Fame consideration. That's another thing that should be looked at. So do you ascribe more to where my thinking is, that you should look at, you know, other things necessarily, not just always longevity and the accumulation of numbers, but look at what you did during that career, even if your career wasn't as long as, you know, obviously as he had hoped it would have been, but his career just ended tragically, unfortunately. Or, you know, are you more focused on the longevity? You know, I try to look at both, but I also want to look at, you know, the other things that players did in their career as well, and just how they were regarded, which takes a little more time to do than just sitting in front of you with a bunch of numbers and just trying to figure those out. There should be some other factors that really should be considered by Hall of Fame voters. So I'll leave it with that without making this video too long. But before I do that, I want to show you one thing that Alan's cards, I believe, I'm going to credit to him, showed me one time. If you take the 73, 71, and 78 Thurman Munson, you got him squatted down behind the plate, making the play at the plate, and there he is after the play. I always thought that was kind of cool. So I'm going to credit that to Alan, whether it was him or not. Thanks, everybody, and have a great day. And do appreciate watching my videos as always. Take care.